Today we'll be crafting this awesome dungeon room full of purple mushrooms and fungi. How are you today? Art Jeremiah here, and I'm back with another video about building a dungeon. I'm proud to announce that this is the 12th episode of Building a Dungeon. If you would like to get regular inspiration, then don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And now let's get back into building that dungeon. For the sake of not repeating myself and boring you, I decided to skip forward a little bit into the build. If you want to see how I made this tile, check out my previous video after watching this one, link in the description. In that video, I show you exactly how I went about making the basic room shape and doing the brickwork pattern. Take note that I measured the walls wrong, so to make up for that, I'm going to break up the wall section and make it look like it's caved in a little bit. After all, this is an ancient ruin and should have some cave-ins and such around the place. I start to achieve this by chipping off wall pieces from the corner. I finish drawing out the brickwork on all sides of the pieces that I chipped off and save it for a later step. Then, I cut out some random sized rectangular shapes. These will represent larger rubble pieces that will be strewn about the room. Just with my fingernail, I chip a lot of the corners off of these rubble pieces so that they don't look like newly carved stonework. Next, I give the little pieces some texture with my piece of sanitized road. As I stated in my last video, this is my preferred method for getting a rough stone finish. It leaves deeper impressions and I don't have to change it out frequently and waste a bunch of aluminum foil. It was a bit awkward for such small pieces, but after I started rolling both the piece of foam and the asphalt between my hands, I got the look that I was going for rather quickly. Now I hot glue the broken bits of the wall into the corner along with some of the other brickish looking pieces of foam. This will make the wall look extra collapsed and ruined. I also hot glue the other rectangular pieces that I textured randomly around the room. Pay attention that I try to add a variety by randomizing the sizing of all the piles that I make. Now, I was originally going to sculpt a bunch of little mushrooms for this room, but I happened to find out that one of the patrons for this channel sells some nicely 3D printed mushrooms on his Etsy store. So I took this opportunity to pick up a pack, and he was amazing enough to send me a huge box of stuff, including some minis from his current Kickstarter that is still active as of publishing this video. Thanks again, August. You're important to this channel, and I appreciate all that you bring. I have various of his links in the description below. Definitely check out his 3D printable files, 3D prints, and his Kickstarter, which is already funded, but you should jump on board and pick up some of those awesome mycinid minis. Anyways, I didn't really get the footage of me spraying the mushrooms because it was too dark outside when I did so. So I just spray painted them, and since I was so excited to have them, I was applying them to the build before they were even dry. I did this using hot glue, and I should probably explain what's going on with the hot glue here as well. So I decided that I wanted an overgrown fungusy type room. So I'm going to use hot glue to help me achieve this. I basically dripped the glue over the rubble both before and after applying the mushrooms. The goal here is to get lots of dripping and streams. And I'm using a high temp setting so that it kind of melts into the foam. And of course these two things aren't usually something we want with hot glue, but it really did wonders for the effects that I'm going for. The hot glue also does a fine job at holding the mushrooms in place. Take note, I'm using my tweezers as I'm using the hot setting on the glue gun and I really don't want to get burned. I'm fairly random with the placement of the mushrooms, but I make sure to leave plenty of walking room for the characters to move around or battle or whatnot. After the hot glue started to dry, I noticed that things were looking rather smooth. So I used the hot tip of the glue gun to make a variety of imprints in all the smooth areas of the hot glue. I figured this would later add some good details to all the goopy looking fungi. And since I have it, I'm using black paint and Mod Podge mix to underpaint the dungeon room. It was a little bit difficult to get into some of the areas underneath the rubble, but I used a brush with long enough bristles that no styrofoam would be showing. When painting up this room, I decided to just do one heavy overbrush of gray acrylic paint instead of adding the 3 different stone colors like the last room. I figured that too much of it would be covered up by the other colors that I plan on painting in this room, and it wouldn't really be worth the time I would put into adding a variety into the brickwork. By heavy overbrush, I mean that I wipe a little bit of paint off the brush, but not so much that it would be a dry brush. Basically, I load the brush, then wipe it on a piece of cardboard once or twice before painting. This will ensure that I don't get it deep into the cracks and crevices, so that it gives an appearance of heavier shadows than are actually there. I then dry brush everything with a coat of antique white by Apple Barrel. This is basically to bring out extra highlights, and I do extra dry brushing anywhere I want to give the appearance of more light hitting or bring out more details. In the last video, I showed you how to mix olive green by mixing a drop of black into yellow paint. And, like the last video, I made a glaze by mixing that color into water and glazing medium. I applied that mixture randomly on the stone just to give the room a more dank dungeon effect. I even switched my brushing up and used my left hand. I also got into painting the dankness and started squirting it right onto the build. I wanted some spots to be slightly darker, so I did a controlled wash just on a few areas. I did this very sparingly because I didn't want to darken the build up too much. I don't know, I'm just not a fan of adding a thick dark wash all over everything, as it kind of muddies it up and dulls everything down, and I just don't like that much. I then pull out a tissue and carefully dab away some of the green glaze and black wash. This just smooths things out a little after adding a little more liquid to the build than I had desired. And now I pull out some purple iris by Apple Barrel and mix it with a couple drops of water in my palette. I add this little bit of water so it smooths out the paint and leaves less brush strokes when painting the mushrooms. I first added an even coat of the purple to all the mushrooms. After that, I randomly blotched the purple on the goopiness around the mushrooms. After that coat dries, I use Apple Barrel Lilac Mist to dry brush all the mushrooms and the fungi. With this layer of dry brushing, I extended a little into the stone areas around the previous purple layers. This just kind of helps blend things in. At this stage, you can really see the details starting to pop. And I do another dry brush layer with pure white. I use this very sparingly just to pull out a few more details that I was really digging. I especially liked the details of the mushrooms. Well worth the purchase. I had some purple glaze that I was using to paint some Ogre Kingdom's miniatures, so I decided to apply that to the goopy areas. This is just a mixture of purple ink, glazing medium, and water. I actually mixed the purple ink on my own. Regardless, I will provide a link in the description of the exact inks that I used. And unfortunately, the camera's battery died on me and I didn't get the last couple steps on video. There wasn't much left though. I just added a little bit of blue ink glaze and touched up all the black areas. You will notice those 2 additions in the glamour shots. So stay tuned until after my Patreon plug so you can see the final result. Or if you don't want to see my beautiful face, you can just skip ahead. If you're getting any sort of value out of my channel, then consider joining us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month, and you will gain access to extra footage of videos like this one and videos that I've done in the past. I'd like to give a big shout out to my latest patron, ... Does that just mean anonymous? I'm assuming that means anonymous. Anyway, huge shout out to him for helping me achieve the first milestone in my Patreon page. Anyway, let's see about those glamour shots.